Well, say go. It's Big House again. And I was wondering from that last chapter, did you get did you figure out where we were on the reservation that was so beautiful with wrought iron fences, whitewashed houses and manicured lawns? And that was the place where the people who lived there were too busy to die. It was a cemetery. Took me forever to figure that one out myself. Anyway, a little bit about Uncle Pete. Uncle Pete, when he came to visit, you had to hide all of your liniments, ointments, anything that mouthwashes, anything with alcohol in it, because he would drink it. And he'd gone about 3/4 blind from drinking wood alcohol or homemade moonshine, which was moonshine that was made in a truck radiator. So you sort of got lead poisoning from that. But if it was liquid and would float between his teeth, Uncle Pete would drink it. It was up to my nanny's place up on the reservation, and they were dairy farmers at the time. And Uncle Pete worked as a hired hand, of course, but he was my grandmother's brother. So for days, Uncle Pete was happy-go-lucky, didn't mind being outdoors. Of course, he was kind of an outdoorsy person anyway. And Uncle Pete was too happy. And my grandmother said, something's not right. So Naguade is very unusually happy the last few days. Well, they followed him around and found out that he had driven a beer tap in the side of the silo from the year before and was drinking the juice out of the silo, believe it or not, for moonshine. One time, I'm sorry, I showed you this symbol, and it is the Iroquois Mohawk people standing all around in a circle around the tree of life. Eagle on the top. And these are the clans of the Haudenosaunee Mohawk tribe. So to the top right is the Turtle clan, that's me. And then you have the eel and the bear and the snipe and the wolf and the crane and the beaver and the deer. And the dove of peace, of course. And for history purposes, if you were in, say you were in the Turtle clan, you could not date or marry anyone from anywhere in North America that also was in the Turtle clan. So they had genetics pretty well figured out even way back then. Son Guade used to come down to our farm. We had a dairy farm just on the edge of the reservation. He used to come down and work there in the summers. And my mother realized that, oh my goodness, he's been very, very happy the last week or so. Unusually happy, but he's not doing any work. He just wants to go outdoors all the time, stay outdoors, and actually go out there and sleep with the pigs sometimes. We had a big pig pen, and we had huge, well, they were monstrous size of a house to me because I was a little kid at the time, but we had huge pigs in there. And my mother went out and watched him one day and found out that he had a 30-gallon crock in the pigsty way in the back covered with canvas, and he was stealing all the garbage out of the house, like the orange peels, apple cores, raisins, anything that you could get that would ferment, and putting it in this vat. And then it had been there all summer, so he's scooping out of that vat. My mother said it was the nastiest smelling stuff you'd ever smelled in your life, but a very high alcohol content. My mother had a fiery temper. She went out and she tipped that 30 gallons of home brew over into the pigsty, right into the mud. The pigs, of course, they'll eat anything, even other pigs. They went through and started drinking the moonshine, got drunk, and were even eating the mud that the moonshine was mixed in with. And they started running around, jumping through barbed wire fences, making love to each other, male or female, it didn't matter. They just went totally crazy and were drunk. Uncle Pete always said that if he came to visit, he always liked Aqua Velva shaving lotion the best because it left your breath so good smelling for days. Uncle Pete and I were walking back from fishing one day, and this car full of tourists pulled up right next to us. And they said, "Oh, wow, are we on the reservation right now?" And Uncle Pete says, "Yes, of course." "Are you real live Indians?" And he says, "Yes, I guess so. Are you real live white people?" And the group in the car all laughed. He says, "Well, man, this is a very, very poor reservation." And Uncle Pete told her that it may be poor, but the people were so poor they didn't even realize it. But there was lots of love. And they said, "Well, it's so desolate because it's up on the Quebec border and it's nothing but bedrock as far as the eye can see." So there was really not very good farming and very poor dairy farming. But anyway, and it was downwind of the Alcoa aluminum smelting plant. So we find out that the cows and the people die off very early. But anyway, the people said, "Well, my goodness, what do you eat up here?" And he said, without hesitating, he says, "Why, ma'am, we eat anything that's slower than an arrow." The people all stood there with question marks over their head, and he goes, "Well, what happens if you don't catch anything hunting? What do you eat?" Uncle Pete, without even hesitating, said, "Oh, slow tourists." Man, you should have seen these people peel out. They couldn't get out of there quick enough. Now, Uncle Pete, wore an aluminum helmet, an ironworker's helmet, because he was an ironworker for high steel for years. But he was always whistling, and he was always in a good mood. I mean, it might be because he was half drunk all the time. But the man was always in a great mood. I mean, I never saw him angry. The only time I ever saw him do anything that was close to anger was the crows. And we were infested in the spring when it's planting season with crows. So Uncle Pete would go out there with a .22 single shot, and he'd knock a crow out of the sky or off a tree or something, but he wouldn't kill it. He'd walk over with a leather tether, put it around the crow's... This may not be a good story, but anyway, he'd put the leather tether around the crow's leg and stake it to the top of a fence post, and then beat the crap out of it till it started crowing. Then he'd go over and sit behind a tree, and the other crows would come in to rescue the crow, and he'd pick them off one at a time. And when the crow quit crowing, he'd go out and grab one of the wounded crows and put them on the fence post, and he would pave the damn place with crows. Now understand that crows live to up to be 110 years old. My grandmother had one that used to perch on the gutter of the house, and it spoke. Crows can speak if you teach them, but it spoke Indian swear words. But if you walked up to the house with a shirt and tie on, this crow would fly just above you and poop on your head or down the front of you or wherever it could, and it would keep harassing you till you went away. And this was for revenuers and IRS and anybody with a piece of paper in their hand from the bank. And this crow would torment them. And if they had people coming over, they said, "Whatever you do, don't wear a shirt and tie." And these people would never listen. They'd always think you were kidding or making something up, and they'd get a cruel lesson from that crow. And they said it was like 90 years old. But it spoke some pretty wicked cuss words. I really like that country song that tells you, Wall Street fell, but we were so poor we couldn't tell. And the reservation at that time pretty much was that same way. They used to smuggle when it was time. Well, they're on the Quebec border, understand, so you can bring things on the reservation on the Quebec side and off on the U.S. side or vice versa without being harassed by treaty. So they used to bring cattle in during the Depression and Canadian blended whiskey during Prohibition and gems and jewels and aliens and whatever was the local fad. And there was a story about my grandfather, Louis, was bringing a load of cattle in during the Depression. And he looked at Uncle Pete and he said, "The family is hungry." So Uncle Pete would take a lining bar and crack one of those cows in the joint, front leg joint, and down the cow would go. Well, the cows that were crippled had no value, so that's what they ate for the weeks after that, is that crippled cow. I don't know if these are great stories, but anyway, my grandmother was the matriarch of our clan. Clan means family, and we find that the relatives would all come over and bring a dish to pass on big occasions. So one Thanksgiving, my mother's about waist high, and she's at the end of a table, and the tables, there was over 270 people came to Thanksgiving dinner, and the tables spread out all over, all the way around the house, the living room, the dining room, and out, even out on the porch and into the lawns where people would sit down. My mother's sitting at the end of this very long table and enjoying dinner, and everybody was great cooks anyway. But she says, out of nowhere, she says, "Hey, has anybody seen my pony Snowball?" And my grandfather says, "Hey, shut up and eat your turkey." She said, "I had that harness and saddle for years after that and never figured out where my pony Snowball went to." But that was life on the reservation. Not a lot of money, but we had a lot of love.